Have you ever thought you were winning, only to realize life had other plans? Imagine this. The person you once left behind walks back into the room, stronger, brighter, and standing beside someone who holds your future in their hands. Crazy, right? But trust me, you'll want to hear this story. The grand ballroom of the Cole Empire headquarters shimmered like a palace of glass and gold. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowd of New York's most powerful executives. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and whispers of fortune floated through the air. Everyone was dressed in luxury, every smile painted to perfection. But beneath the glitter and applause, a storm was brewing, one that would shatter egos, crush illusions, and turn the night into a battlefield of humiliation and truth. Mark Bennett entered the room with the swagger of a man who believed the world belonged to him. His tuxedo was crisp, his Rolex gleamed, and at his side was his new wife, Vanessa. She was young, strikingly beautiful, wrapped in a gown that shimmered under the chandelier lights. Mark held her hand proudly, as if she were a trophy he had earned. He scanned the crowd, soaking in the admiration of his colleagues. Tonight, he wasn't just an employee at Cole Enterprises. He believed he was a man who had won the game of life. What Mark didn't know was that fate had prepared the cruelest twist for him. Across the ballroom, a figure stepped through the entrance. Olivia Hart, his ex-wife. The sight of her stopped more than a few conversations. She wasn't the same woman people remembered. Gone was the modest housewife Mark had discarded like yesterday's news. Tonight, Olivia radiated elegance. Her black satin gown fit her like it had been sewn by angels. Her hair, once simply tied back, now cascaded in glossy waves. And her eyes, they carried a quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving betrayal and walking through fire. Mark's smirk faltered. For a moment, he didn't even recognize her. And then, with a jolt of disbelief, he realized who she was. The whispers spread quickly. "Is that Olivia Bennett? She looks different. Stunning." Didn't Mark leave her for that young blonde he's with now? Mark's ears burned as he tightened his grip on Vanessa's hand. He wanted to look away, to dismiss Olivia as nothing more than a ghost from his past. But then something happened that made his blood run cold. Olivia wasn't alone. Walking beside her with a calm, commanding presence was Ethan Cole, the billionaire CEO of Cole Enterprises, the man who owned the very company Mark worked for. Ethan's hand rested protectively on Olivia's back as he guided her through the room. Every eye turned toward them. Conversations halted, glasses froze midair. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. For Mark, the realization hit like a punch to the gut. His ex-wife wasn't just back, she was standing beside the man who could decide the future of his career with a single word. Mark forced a laugh, trying to mask his discomfort. "What's she doing here?" he muttered under his breath. Vanessa, oblivious to the storm inside him, leaned closer. "Who cares? She looks like she's trying too hard. Just ignore her." But Mark couldn't ignore her. He couldn't ignore the way Ethan Cole glanced at Olivia, like she was the only woman in the room. He couldn't ignore the way people around them whispered in awe, their gazes flicking from Mark to his ex-wife, comparing, judging. And worst of all, he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his chest. That maybe, just maybe, he hadn't upgraded at all. Mark remembered the last time he had spoken to Olivia. His words had been sharp, cruel, dripping with arrogance. "You'll never be more than a burden. Vanessa is everything you're not. Young, exciting, ambitious. I need someone who matches my future. You'll fade away. You'll beg me to take you back one day." Those words had echoed in Olivia's mind for months. Tonight, as she walked beside Ethan Cole, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. Those same words now threatened to destroy Mark's pride in front of everyone. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, pulling the crowd's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a special night. Our CEO, Mr. Ethan Cole, will be making a personal announcement." The spotlight turned to Ethan, and with it, to Olivia. Cameras flashed wildly as Ethan stepped forward, his arms still linked with hers. He spoke with calm authority, his voice echoing across the ballroom. "Success is not just about profit margins. It's about people. And tonight, I want to recognize someone who embodies resilience, integrity, and strength." The crowd leaned in, Mark's chest tightened. Who was he talking about? Ethan smiled at Olivia. "I'd like you all to meet Olivia Hart. She's not just a guest tonight, she's someone I'm proud to call my partner." The room erupted in whispers, gasps, and flashes of light. The cameras turned, the eyes turned, and every gaze fell on Olivia. Mark's world began to collapse. His colleagues' expressions shifted from respect to curiosity, then to pity. Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm, her face pale with confusion. And Mark stood frozen, watching the woman he had once discarded rise higher than he ever imagined. The hook was set. The stage was ready. The drama had only begun. Because Mark was about to learn the most humiliating truth of all. His ex-wife's new man wasn't just a billionaire CEO. He was Mark's boss. Before the dazzling night at Cole Enterprises, before the gasps and flashing cameras, Olivia Hart was just a woman who had given everything to the wrong man. She was born in a modest neighborhood in Queens, the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. Her parents weren't wealthy, but they raised her with values that money couldn't buy: honesty, kindness, and resilience. Olivia grew up believing in love, in hard work, in the kind of loyalty that could weather any storm. She carried those beliefs into adulthood, never imagining how deeply they would be tested. At 26, she met Mark Bennett. Back then, he wasn't the confident, arrogant man who strutted into ballrooms with a woman on his arm. He was a struggling salesman with big dreams and an even bigger ego. Olivia saw past his bravado. She saw the man who stayed up late drafting business plans, the man who whispered about success while staring at the ceiling of their tiny apartment. She believed in him when no one else did. For years, Olivia worked tirelessly to support him. She held 2 jobs, teaching part-time at a community center by day and waiting tables at night. She cooked, she cleaned, she managed their bills down to the last cent. And when Mark failed, as he often did in those early years, she was the one who lifted him back up. "Don't give up," she used to tell him, her hand on his. "You're going to make it. I believe in you." But somewhere along the way, Mark stopped seeing her as his partner and started seeing her as dead weight. The turning point came when Olivia suggested they start a family. She had always dreamed of being a mother, of filling their home with laughter and love. Mark's response cut deep. "Kids? Olivia, I don't have time for that. I need a wife who matches my ambition, not one who slows me down." Those words lingered like poison. But Olivia pushed them aside, convincing herself that he was just stressed, that things would change. She continued to support him, putting her own career on hold so he could chase his. She had studied communications and marketing, had once dreamed of working at a major firm, but she let those dreams fade for the sake of his. The more Mark climbed, the less he saw her. He began staying out late, dressing sharper, spending money they didn't have. Olivia noticed the changes: the cologne that wasn't hers, the lipstick stains on his shirts, the excuses that sounded thinner each time. When she confronted him, he laughed it off. "You're imagining things. You're just insecure because you don't measure up anymore." The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday night. Olivia had cooked his favorite meal, hoping to rekindle some spark between them. Mark came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She asked him directly, her voice trembling, "Are you seeing someone else?" Mark didn't even flinch. "Yes, and you know what? She's everything you're not. Young, stylish. She understands my ambition. You're just ordinary, Olivia. I need more. I deserve more." Olivia felt her world collapse. She had given this man years of her life, her dreams, her love, and he discarded her like nothing. That night, he packed a bag, leaving her alone in the apartment they once called home. The divorce was quick and brutal. Mark fought to keep most of what little they had, leaving Olivia with almost nothing. He moved on with Vanessa, the young woman he'd been seeing behind her back, flaunting their relationship on social media as if Olivia had never existed. For months, Olivia sank into silence. She avoided friends, ignored calls from her family, and buried herself in grief. Nights were the worst. She would lie awake, replaying every word, every sacrifice, every moment she had believed in him. The humiliation burned deep. But slowly, painfully, Olivia began to rebuild. She took freelance jobs in communications, leaning on the skills she had once abandoned. She started therapy, learning to face her pain instead of burying it. And one day, while sitting in a quiet cafe with her laptop, she met a man who would change everything: Ethan Cole. Their first encounter wasn't dramatic. Ethan had stopped in for coffee between meetings, his sleeves rolled up, his presence commanding but unpretentious. He noticed Olivia struggling with a heavy box of files and offered to help. She thanked him, not realizing who he was. To her, he was just a kind stranger, with sharp eyes and a disarming smile. What followed was a series of chance encounters, at the cafe, at the library, on the subway. They began talking, sharing pieces of their lives. Olivia was cautious, still nursing the wounds of betrayal. But Ethan was patient. He listened. He saw her. Not as a burden, not as someone ordinary, but as a woman with strength she didn't even know she had. It wasn't until weeks later that Olivia learned the truth. Ethan Cole was the CEO of Cole Enterprises, one of the most powerful corporations in the city. But by then, she didn't care about his wealth or his power. What mattered was the way he looked at her, the way he respected her, the way he made her feel worthy again. For the first time in years, Olivia began to dream again. She dressed differently, carried herself with confidence, and little by little, the woman she thought she had lost came back to life. And so when Ethan invited her to the company's annual gala, she hesitated. She knew Mark worked there. She knew the risk of facing him. But Ethan's hand on hers was steady. "You don't have to hide anymore. Walk with me." Olivia took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She wasn't just walking into a gala. She was walking into a reckoning, and she had no idea that Mark's smug world was about to collapse in front of everyone. The Cole Enterprises annual gala wasn't just another company event. It was the event of the year. It was where power was paraded like jewelry, where the city's elite came to be seen, and where whispers of business deals often carried more weight than signed contracts. For employees, it was a chance to rub shoulders with executives. For investors, it was a showcase of stability and strength. For socialites, it was another excuse to drown in champagne and diamonds. The venue itself was a spectacle. The Cole Tower, a 50-story glass skyscraper that overlooked the city skyline, had been transformed into a kingdom of light. The grand atrium was dressed in velvet drapes and towering floral arrangements. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like falling stars. A live orchestra played gentle strains of Mozart, while waiters in white gloves floated through the crowd with silver trays of champagne flutes. For most people, this was a night of celebration. For Mark Bennett, it was his stage. He had been rehearsing for this moment for weeks. Ever since Ethan Cole had announced he would attend in person, a rare occurrence, Mark had been fantasizing about catching the CEO's eye. A handshake, a clever remark, perhaps even a compliment. If he played his cards right, tonight could open doors, promotions, influence, a seat at the table where real decisions were made. Mark smoothed his tuxedo jacket and guided Vanessa through the crowd like a man leading a queen. He greeted colleagues with overdone charm, laughing too loudly, boasting too freely. Every introduction to his new wife was a declaration. "Look at me. Look what I've got now." Vanessa, with her youthful beauty and designer gown, basked in the attention. She whispered in his ear, "Everyone's staring at us." Mark smirked, sipping his champagne. Good. Let them see what an upgrade looks like. But beneath the polished surface, the company buzzed with tension. Cole Enterprises had been expanding aggressively into new markets. Whispers of mergers and restructures floated through the air. Employees feared being cut. Managers vied for favor. Everyone wanted Ethan Cole's attention. His approval could make or break careers. And tonight, Ethan Cole wasn't just the ghost in the boardroom. He was here, in person. The moment he stepped into the atrium, silence rippled through the crowd like a wave. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Cameras clicked. Ethan was tall, commanding, with the kind of presence that silenced a room without a word. He wore a simple black suit, no flashy watch, no ostentatious accessories, yet somehow he shone brighter than anyone else there. And then the true shock came. On his arm was Olivia Hart. Gasps rose from the crowd. The orchestra faltered for a beat before resuming. People craned their necks, whispering behind their champagne glasses. Mark froze. His grip on Vanessa's hand tightened until she flinched. He forced himself to breathe, to maintain his mask. But inside, panic bloomed. Of all the women in New York, of all the dates Ethan Cole could have brought, why her? Why Olivia? The ballroom seemed to close in on him. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues shifting, their whispers cutting like knives. They remembered the divorce. They remembered the way he had paraded Vanessa as proof of his upgrade. And now, here was Olivia, radiant and powerful, walking beside the man who could end Mark's career with a single signature. The setting transformed from a celebration into a battlefield. At one end of the hall, employees and executives clustered around Ethan, eager to impress. Olivia stood beside him, her posture regal, her expression calm. She wasn't the shy, invisible woman they remembered from Mark's side. She was luminous, a vision of strength and elegance. Her gown shimmered under the chandeliers, her confidence filling every corner of the room. At the other end, Mark plastered on a grin, pretending not to notice, though every nerve in his body screamed. Vanessa tugged at his arm, whispering, "Why is she here? Who is she with?" Mark muttered through clenched teeth, "No one important, just ignore them." But no one was ignoring them. The entire gala had shifted focus. The real spectacle wasn't the orchestra, or the champagne tower, or the speeches. It was the silent war between the man who thought he had won and the woman he once discarded. The master of ceremonies finally took the stage, his voice booming through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cole Enterprises annual gala. Tonight, we celebrate not only our success, but our future, and we are honored to have our CEO, Mr. Ethan Cole, with us tonight." Thunderous applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Ethan stepped forward, Olivia at his side, and the room erupted in admiration. Mark clapped stiffly, his palms sweating, his stomach churned as the MC continued. "Before Mr. Cole addresses us, we'd like to recognize some of our rising stars, employees who represent the future of this company." Mark straightened, his heart pounding. "This is it, my moment. My name has to be on that list." The MC began calling names. Young executives walked to the stage, shaking Ethan's hand, posing for photos. Mark waited, his chest swelling with anticipation. Vanessa squeezed his hand. "You'll be next." But his name never came. Instead, the final recognition went to a woman from another department, a woman far less experienced than him. Mark's jaw clenched as he forced a smile, the applause ringing in his ears like mockery. And then came the dagger. The MC cleared his throat. "And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cole would like to make a personal introduction." The spotlight swept across the room and landed on Olivia. Gasps echoed again, the orchestra hushed. Ethan extended his hand toward her, his voice calm, firm, resonant. "This is Olivia Hart. She is not only my guest tonight, she is someone whose strength and character inspire me every single day." The applause thundered, louder than before. Cameras flashed furiously. Mark's smile cracked. He could feel the weight of every eye turning toward him, their whispers growing sharper. His so-called upgrade, Vanessa, sat rigid beside him, her smile faltering. The ballroom, once his imagined stage, had turned into his cage, and Mark had no idea that the next announcement would destroy the last shred of his pride. Mark Bennett had always believed he was destined for more. From his early 20s, he carried himself with the swagger of a man convinced the world owed him success. But behind the cocky grin and slick suits, Mark was nothing more than a hustler. A man who confused ambition with entitlement and charm with character. He wasn't born rich. His childhood in Newark was modest at best. His father worked at a shipping dock, his mother at a laundromat. Mark often told people he hated watching his parents struggle. But instead of admiring their hard work, he despised it. To him, poverty wasn't something to overcome with grit. It was something to outrun by any means necessary. He vowed he would never be ordinary. In his 20s, Mark was all flash and little substance. He wore cheap suits that looked expensive from a distance, borrowed money for cars he couldn't afford, and spent hours in bars networking with anyone who might give him a shortcut to success. That was the Mark Olivia met. And at first, she fell for him. She believed his energy, his hunger, his endless speeches about making it big. She mistook arrogance for confidence. When he whispered that they'd conquer the world together, she thought he meant with her, not on her back. For years, Mark leaned on Olivia's sacrifices. She worked, she saved, she encouraged him after every failure. But instead of gratitude, resentment festered in him. The more she supported, the more he saw her as someone holding him down. By the time Mark secured a mid-level job at Cole Enterprises, his ego had outgrown his achievements. He was a salesman with a decent salary, but in his mind he was already a king. He looked at the executives above him, the luxury cars outside the building, the penthouse addresses, and convinced himself he deserved it all. Not someday, not eventually, but now. That hunger turned toxic when he met Vanessa. She was young, glamorous, obsessed with designer labels and Instagram followers. To Mark, she was the image of success. He saw in her what he thought he wanted the world to see in him: sophistication, desirability, proof that he had made it. The affair began casually. After-work drinks, secret dinners, text messages filled with promises. At first, Mark told himself it was harmless. Olivia was too serious, too domestic. Vanessa was excitement. But soon, excitement turned into obsession. He wanted the world to see him with her on his arm, to admire the shiny prize he had claimed. Olivia eventually found out. She confronted him, trembling but determined. "Mark, I know about her. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't thrown away everything we built." Mark didn't deny it. He didn't even hesitate. "Olivia, face it, you're not enough anymore. I need someone who matches where I'm going. Vanessa is younger, stylish, ambitious. She fits the life I deserve. You belong in the past." Those words shattered her, but to Mark, they felt like liberation. In his mind, he wasn't abandoning a wife, he was upgrading. He paraded Vanessa openly. Expensive dinners, flashy trips, selfies at rooftop bars. On social media, he posted captions dripping with arrogance. "Living my best life, trading up. Success looks good on me." Colleagues noticed, whispered, judged. But Mark thrived on the attention. He didn't care if they thought he was cruel. He wanted them to envy him. Every sideways glance felt like validation. Every whispered insult was proof he was above them. But beneath the bravado, Mark was insecure. His position at Cole Enterprises was modest. He wasn't a director, let alone an executive. He reported to managers who barely remembered his name. Still, he strutted through the office as if he owned the building. He boasted at lunches about future promotions that didn't exist. He hinted at investments he hadn't made, cars he couldn't afford, contacts he didn't actually know. To Vanessa, he painted himself as a rising star. "Ethan Cole? He'll notice me soon. I'm going places in this company. You'll see." But Ethan Cole didn't notice him, and when Olivia appeared on Ethan's arm at the gala, Mark's worst fear became reality. He wasn't a rising star at all. He was just a pawn in a game he didn't even understand. As he stood in the ballroom, watching his ex-wife bask in the glow of admiration, memories haunted him. He remembered the nights Olivia had stayed up balancing their bills, the way she had clipped coupons, cooked dinners, encouraged him when he wanted to quit. He remembered the sacrifices she made so he could chase dreams that weren't even hers. And now, the woman he had mocked as ordinary was walking beside the very man who held his future in his hands. Mark's arrogance had always been his armor. He used it to hide his fear, his inadequacy, his gnawing suspicion that maybe he wasn't good enough. But tonight, the armor was cracking. The whispers in the ballroom weren't envy anymore. They were pity, contempt, disbelief. Vanessa noticed too. She leaned closer, her smile tight. "Mark, why didn't you tell me your ex was with him? With Ethan Cole?" Mark's throat tightened. "It doesn't matter," he lied. "She's just trying to make me jealous." But he knew it did matter. It mattered more than anything, because the balance of power had shifted. He wasn't the man who upgraded. He was the man who had been outclassed, outshone, and left standing in the ruins of his own arrogance. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Because Ethan Cole was about to reveal something that would strip Mark of the last illusion he had left: his career. The clinking of champagne glasses faded as Ethan Cole raised his hand for silence. The ballroom obeyed instantly. Every eye locked on the CEO. His calm authority filled the air like electricity. Olivia stood by his side, radiant, her presence magnified by the way Ethan looked at her, as if she were the most valuable treasure in the room. Mark Bennett's jaw tightened. His heart hammered in his chest, but he forced his face into a smug grin. "Stay calm. Don't let them see you sweat," he whispered to Vanessa. "It's all for show. He'll say a few words, then we'll be back in the spotlight." But what Ethan said next shattered the illusion Mark had been clinging to. "Tonight," Ethan began, his voice deep and steady, "isn't just about celebrating numbers on a balance sheet. It's about honoring the people who represent integrity, strength, and resilience. People who remind us that true value isn't measured by money or titles, but by character." He paused, letting the words sink in. The crowd leaned forward. Olivia's hand rested lightly on his arm, and for a moment the room seemed to blur around her. "This woman beside me," Ethan continued, is one of those people. Olivia Hart has faced trials that would have broken many. But instead of breaking, she rose. She inspires me. And she reminds this company of what real strength looks like. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Heads turned toward Olivia with admiration. Mark's face burned. His colleagues, men and women he'd spent years trying to impress, were clapping for her. His ex-wife, the same woman he had called ordinary, boring, worthless. Now, in the very company where he worked, she was being lifted up as a symbol of power. Vanessa leaned in, whispering, "Mark," everyone's staring at her. At them. "What's going on?" He snapped, "Shut up, just smile." But inside, panic clawed at him. Ethan raised his glass. "To Olivia Hart," he declared. "May we all learn from her strength." The crowd echoed, "To Olivia." Crystal flutes clinked in unison. Mark's hand trembled around his glass. He forced it up, but the champagne sloshed, spilling onto his sleeve. A few executives nearby chuckled under their breath. It was only the beginning. The master of ceremonies returned to the microphone. "And now, Mr. Cole will announce some important changes in leadership." Mark straightened. "This is it. My chance. He has to mention me." Ethan scanned the crowd. "As we continue to expand, I want leaders who embody resilience and integrity, people who lead by example, not ego. That's why I'm pleased to announce the promotion of several key employees." One by one, names were called. Young executives, fresh managers, even one of Mark's peers. All walked to the stage to thunderous applause. Mark waited, his chest swelling each time a name was read. "It'll be me next. It has to be." But his name never came. Instead, Ethan's gaze swept the crowd and landed directly on him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mark's pulse roared in his ears. His forced smile faltered. For a moment, he thought Ethan might still call him, might still throw him the recognition he craved. But Ethan's voice cut like steel. "And let me be clear," he said slowly, his eyes never leaving Mark. "This company has no room for arrogance, entitlement, or disloyalty. Those who believe they can build themselves up by tearing others down will find no future here." The crowd stiffened. A ripple of whispers spread. People followed Ethan's gaze, and every head turned toward Mark. It was a public execution without a single name spoken. Mark's face went crimson. He tried to laugh, to wave it off as coincidence, but no one believed it. His colleagues exchanged knowing looks. Vanessa's hand slipped from his arm. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is he talking about you?" Mark's chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to deny, to claim it was all a mistake. But the truth was undeniable. Everyone could see it. Ethan Cole had just exposed him in front of the entire company, in front of his new wife, in front of Olivia. Humiliation crashed over him in waves. He felt naked under the chandeliers. Every insecurity he had ever buried laid bare. But the worst was yet to come. The orchestra resumed softly, the chatter returning, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where once people looked at Mark with envy, now they looked with pity, or worse, disdain. Executives he had courted for months avoided his gaze. Colleagues whispered behind their hands. Even Vanessa seemed to shrink beside him, her confidence dissolving. He tried to recover. He grabbed a passing waiter, snatching a fresh glass of champagne. He raised it high, forcing a laugh. "Well, here's to promotions, eh?" No one joined him. The silence around his forced toast was deafening. At that exact moment, Ethan stepped off the stage with Olivia on his arm. They moved through the crowd with ease, people parting for them, congratulating them, admiring them. Every handshake Ethan gave was mirrored by a warm smile toward Olivia. She wasn't just his date. She was his equal. Mark's stomach churned as they drew closer. He couldn't avoid them forever. And then it happened. Ethan stopped right in front of him. The room hushed again, sensing the tension. Olivia's eyes met Mark's. For the first time in months, he looked at her without arrogance, without smugness. What he saw in her gaze wasn't anger. It was strength, calm, unshakable. Ethan's voice was polite but firm. "Mr. Bennett, I trust you're enjoying the evening?" Mark forced a grin. "Of course, sir. Wonderful event." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good. I expect all my employees to remember tonight well." He squeezed Olivia's hand. "It's not every day you see what true success looks like." And with that, he moved on, leaving Mark standing in silence, his forced grin collapsing. The whispers around him grew louder. Vanessa tugged at his sleeve, her voice sharp now. "You didn't tell me your ex was with him. You didn't tell me he hates you. What else aren't you telling me?" Mark's throat went dry. He had no answer. And in that moment, with the whole ballroom watching, Mark realized the betrayal wasn't just public. It was only the beginning of his downfall. The gala ended in a storm of flashing cameras and murmured gossip. Guests drifted out into the night air, their chauffeurs waiting with polished cars, their laughter tinged with the residue of the spectacle they had just witnessed. For most, it would be a story to share over brunch. How Ethan Cole had appeared with a mysterious woman, how she outshone the entire room, and how one man, Mark Bennett, had been silently but unmistakably dismantled in front of everyone. But behind the glamorous curtain, the aftermath told two very different stories. Olivia Hart sat in Ethan's car, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Outwardly, she had been flawless, graceful, confident, untouchable. But now, with the night behind her, the weight of it all pressed down. Her chest ached with the memory of hundreds of eyes on her. The whispers, the gasps, the way Mark's face had contorted when Ethan praised her, it all replayed in her mind like an endless reel. She should have felt triumphant. She should have felt vindicated. And part of her did. But another part trembled with exhaustion. "Are you all right?" Ethan's voice broke into her thoughts, steady and warm. His hand covered hers, grounding her. Olivia forced a smile. "I'm fine, just overwhelmed." "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. "The way you carried yourself, it reminded everyone in that room that dignity can't be destroyed. Not by betrayal, not by arrogance." Her eyes stung, tears threatening to break the mask she had worn all evening. She turned to the window, watching the city lights blur. "I didn't feel incredible. I felt like I was holding my breath the whole time." Ethan didn't press. He simply let the silence stretch, his hand never leaving hers. He understood something few did, that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep standing, even when fear consumed you. Later, when Olivia returned to her apartment, she finally let the mask fall. She kicked off her heels, collapsed onto the couch, and buried her face in her hands. The tears came hot and relentless, a release of months of pain. She cried for the years she had wasted on Mark, for the humiliation of being discarded, for the cruel words that had scarred her deeper than she admitted. In the quiet, she whispered to herself, "Was it worth it? Was facing him worth reopening everything I tried to bury?" For all her growth, all her progress, Olivia still carried wounds. Tonight had ripped them open again. But across town, another collapse was unfolding, and it looked nothing like Olivia's quiet storm. Mark Bennett slammed the door of his apartment, his tie hanging loose, his tuxedo jacket crumpled on the floor. Vanessa trailed behind him, her heels clicking angrily, her arms crossed. "I cannot believe you," she snapped. "You made me walk into that room blind. Everyone knew she was with him except me. Do you know how ridiculous I looked? Do you know what people were saying about me?" Mark poured himself a drink, his hands shaking as he sloshed whiskey into a glass. He swallowed it in one gulp, then poured another. "It was supposed to be my night," he muttered, his voice bitter. "I had it all planned. I was going to get Cole's attention. I was going to show everyone I'd moved on, upgraded. And then she walked in, with him." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Don't you dare blame this on her. You lied to me, Mark. You told me she was nothing, that she'd disappeared. Clearly, she hasn't. Clearly, she's doing better than you." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Mark slammed the glass onto the counter, shattering it. "Don't say that. She's not better than me. She never was. I made her. Without me, she'd still be." He stopped, choking on his own fury. Vanessa stepped back, her face hard. "No, Mark. Without you, she's standing beside a billionaire, and you're the one still clawing for scraps." Silence fell heavy. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Mark sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His mind reeled with humiliation. The laughter he imagined behind every whisper, the pity in his colleagues' eyes, the way Ethan Cole had looked at him as though he were nothing. He wanted to scream, to break something, to erase the night, but there was no erasing it. For the first time, Mark felt the walls closing in. His career at Cole Enterprises was suddenly fragile. His marriage to Vanessa, already shallow, was cracking, and the ex-wife he had mocked as ordinary had just outshone him on the grandest stage. He poured another drink, his thoughts spiraling. How did it all flip so fast? How did I lose everything? Meanwhile, Olivia sat alone in the dark, her tears finally slowing. She looked around her modest apartment. The place she had built on her own, without Mark, without anyone else. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. She wiped her eyes, whispering, "I'm not broken. Not anymore." But the ache in her chest lingered. Facing Mark had reopened wounds she thought had healed. The humiliation of the past still haunted her, and deep down, a part of her feared he wasn't done. Because Mark Bennett was not the type of man to accept defeat quietly. He was the type to fight, to claw, to destroy anyone who dared expose his weakness. And Olivia had just humiliated him in front of the one man who held his future in his hands. The week after the gala was a blur of whispers and speculation across Cole Enterprises. The story spread through the glass offices and marble hallways faster than any corporate memo. Ethan Cole had appeared at the gala with a mysterious woman, introduced her as his partner, and publicly humiliated Mark Bennett in the process. Mark felt the sting of it everywhere. Colleagues no longer greeted him with the same respect. Some avoided him altogether, afraid of being tainted by association. Others smirked behind his back, repeating Ethan's words like a curse. No room for arrogance, entitlement, or disloyalty. Every step Mark took through the office was heavy with shame. He told himself it would blow over, that soon the gossip would die down. But deep inside, he knew the truth. His reputation had been scarred, and the scar had a name: Olivia Hart. He tried to drown his humiliation in work. He buried himself in spreadsheets, sales reports, client calls. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the image of her standing beside Ethan, radiant, admired, untouchable. One afternoon, Mark was summoned to a meeting on the top floor, the executive level. His stomach twisted. He hadn't been called up there in months. Maybe this was his chance, his shot at redemption. Maybe Ethan was ready to see him as more than the man who'd been humiliated. Mark straightened his tie, rehearsed a confident smile, and stepped into the elevator. The doors opened to reveal the sleek, quiet world of the top executives. White marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, art worth more than his yearly salary. He was escorted into a boardroom where Ethan Cole sat at the head of the table. But Ethan wasn't alone. Olivia was there. She sat to Ethan's right, a leather portfolio in front of her, her posture poised and professional. She wasn't just a guest. She wasn't just his date. She belonged in that room. Mark froze. His heart pounded as the realization sank in. Why is she here? What is she doing in this meeting? Ethan's eyes flicked up. "Mr. Bennett, sit down." Mark obeyed, his confidence cracking with every second. He avoided Olivia's gaze, but he could feel her presence like a spotlight burning into him. The meeting began, but Mark barely heard a word. Ethan discussed new partnerships, restructuring initiatives, expansion into international markets. Executives nodded, scribbling notes, asking questions. And each time Ethan spoke, he turned to Olivia, not for approval, but for collaboration. "Olivia, what's your take on the branding approach?" "I think the campaign should focus on resilience and innovation," she replied smoothly. "That message aligns with both our clients' expectations and our long-term vision." "Excellent," Ethan said with a nod. Mark's stomach dropped. He had expected Olivia to sit quietly, maybe as a guest. Instead, she was steering the conversation. Her insights were sharp, her confidence unshakable, and Ethan listened to her as if her voice carried as much weight as his own. Finally, Mark couldn't take it. "Excuse me," he blurted, his voice sharper than intended. "What exactly is she doing here?" The room fell silent. Every executive turned toward him. Ethan's eyes narrowed, but it was Olivia who spoke first. "I'm here because I belong here, Mark," she said evenly. "I've been consulting with Cole Enterprises on communications strategy for months." Mark's jaw dropped. "Consulting?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Yes, Olivia is one of our strategic advisors. Her expertise in communications and branding has been instrumental in shaping our expansion. You'll be seeing more of her from now on." The words hit Mark like a hammer. Olivia wasn't just Ethan's partner in life. She was part of the company. She had carved out a role for herself in the very world Mark had been desperate to climb. His voice cracked. "But she's just..." Olivia's eyes flashed. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Not here, not anymore." The authority in her tone silenced him. For the first time, Mark realized he wasn't speaking to the woman he had once dismissed. He was speaking to someone who held power. Real power. The meeting continued without him. Olivia offered insights, executives nodded, Ethan approved. Mark sat in silence, his mind spiraling. The walls seemed to close in, the marble floor beneath him unsteady. He felt small, invisible, irrelevant. When the meeting ended, Ethan rose. "Mr. Bennett, stay a moment." The other executives filed out, leaving Mark alone with Ethan and Olivia. Ethan's voice was calm but sharp. "Mark, this company values character above all. You've had chances to prove yourself, and you've chosen arrogance instead. Consider this your final warning. Step up or step out." Mark swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Ethan turned to Olivia, his tone softening. "Ready for lunch?" She smiled, gathering her portfolio. "Always." Together, they walked out, leaving Mark behind in the cavernous boardroom. The sound of the door closing echoed like a final verdict. Mark sat in silence, his head in his hands. His ex-wife wasn't just back. She was integrated into the very fabric of the life he had wanted. She had become everything he claimed she could never be: powerful, respected, indispensable. And worst of all, she wasn't finished. Because Olivia Hart had one more secret to reveal, one that would not only crush Mark's pride, but also threaten his very place in the company. The weeks after that fateful boardroom meeting marked the beginning of a new chapter for Olivia Hart. The woman who had once been abandoned, humiliated, and dismissed was gone. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, not because she had changed who she was, but because she had finally embraced everything she had always been capable of. Her mornings no longer began with hesitation or dread. Instead, she woke before sunrise, her mind clear, her body energized. She started training with a personal coach Ethan had introduced her to, boxing sessions twice a week, strength training on the other days. Each punch against the bag wasn't just exercise, it was a release, a declaration that she would never again let herself be broken down by anyone. Her wardrobe transformed too. Gone were the plain, practical clothes she had once hidden behind. With the guidance of a stylist, Olivia rebuilt her image, not for vanity, but for power. Tailored suits that exuded authority, sleek dresses that carried elegance, accessories that whispered wealth without screaming it. Every piece of clothing became armor, every appearance a statement. But the most profound transformation wasn't physical, it was her mindset. For years, Olivia had carried the words Mark once spat at her like shackles: ordinary, boring, not enough. Those words had haunted her in the silence of her apartment, in the loneliness of sleepless nights. But now she looked in the mirror and saw the truth. She wasn't ordinary, she was extraordinary. She wasn't not enough, she was more than enough. For herself, for Ethan, for the empire she was helping to shape. Ethan noticed the shift, but he didn't take credit. He simply stood beside her, steady and supportive, never overshadowing her. One evening, as they prepared to attend a networking dinner, he adjusted his tie and glanced at her. "Do you realize what you've become?" he asked. Olivia smiled softly. "What's that?" "A force," he said. "A force people can't ignore." And he was right. At company events, executives who once dismissed her now sought her opinion. Investors leaned in when she spoke. Even employees whispered her name in admiration, calling her the woman who stood beside the CEO and didn't just smile, she led. Meanwhile, Mark Bennett's world was crumbling. The humiliation from the gala had followed him into the office like a shadow he couldn't escape. His colleagues' respect had evaporated, replaced by smirks and whispers. The executives who once entertained his desperate networking attempts now brushed him off. Even clients began requesting different account managers, citing a lack of professionalism. At home, Vanessa grew restless. The woman who had once adored being shown off now found herself embarrassed by him. She scrolled through social media, her eyes narrowing at photos of Olivia and Ethan, at charity galas, at art exhibitions, at high-profile dinners. Olivia looked radiant, Ethan looked proud, and together they looked untouchable. "Why couldn't you be more like him?" Vanessa snapped one night, tossing her phone onto the bed. Mark glared. "Because I'm not him. I don't need to be him." But the truth gnawed at him. He wanted nothing more than to be Ethan Cole, and nothing less than to erase Olivia's new glow. His drinking worsened. He began missing deadlines, stumbling into work late, snapping at colleagues. The man who once strutted through the office with arrogance now dragged himself like a ghost, haunted by his own downfall. And Olivia saw it. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. His collapse was his own making. But in quiet moments, she allowed herself the satisfaction of knowing that justice was unfolding naturally. Her transformation wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming herself. She no longer walked into rooms hoping to be accepted. She walked in knowing she belonged. She no longer shrank under the weight of judgment. She stood tall, unshakable, a living reminder that betrayal doesn't destroy, it refines. The pinnacle of her transformation came on the night of the Cole Enterprises annual charity gala, just 2 months after the humiliating evening that had begun it all. This event was even larger, drawing not only executives and investors but also politicians, celebrities, and media giants. Olivia stepped into the ballroom wearing a gown of midnight blue silk, her hair swept elegantly to the side, diamonds glimmering at her ears. The cameras flashed wildly the moment she arrived at Ethan's side. But this time she didn't feel like an accessory. She felt like an equal. Reporters clamored for her attention. "Miss Hart, over here. Can we get a quote?" She paused, smiling calmly. "Strength isn't about never falling," she said into the microphones. "It's about getting back up and becoming stronger than before." The quote went viral the next morning, splashed across headlines. Olivia Hart, the woman beside Ethan Cole who redefines resilience. Mark read those headlines with a rage that nearly consumed him. Vanessa shoved the paper at him. "She's everywhere, Mark. She's the woman everyone's talking about. And you, what are you?" He slammed his fist against the table. "I'll show them. I'll show her." But deep down, even as his anger boiled, he felt something far worse than rage. He felt powerless. He had built his identity on being the man who had upgraded, who had traded Olivia in for something shinier. Now that identity was ashes. The woman he had discarded had transformed into someone he couldn't reach, couldn't belittle, couldn't control. And she wasn't done yet. Olivia stood in front of her mirror the night after the gala, unpinning her hair, her reflection glowing with quiet confidence. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who cried alone in the dark, who begged for answers that never came. She whispered to her reflection, "Never again." Because the next step wasn't just transformation, it was confrontation. And Olivia was ready to face Mark one last time, in front of everyone. The stage was set at Cole Enterprises' Quarterly Leadership Summit, a grand event held in the same glittering tower where Mark once dreamed of climbing to the top. Executives, managers, and employees from across the country filled the vast conference hall, its massive screens glowing with the company's logo. The atmosphere was charged. This summit wasn't just about numbers. Everyone whispered that Ethan Cole was planning a major announcement. Mark sat near the middle rows, his tie loose, his palms sweating. He had barely been invited, and only because his department still needed representation. He told himself this was his chance to claw back some dignity, to prove to everyone he still had value. Vanessa hadn't come with him. She had stormed out of their apartment days ago after one fight too many, leaving him stewing in whiskey and silence. He straightened his shoulders, trying to appear composed. But inside, he was unraveling. His colleagues gave him polite nods but avoided sitting too close. Whispers followed him like shadows, and when his eyes scanned the front row, he saw her. Olivia. She sat at Ethan's side, radiant in a white tailored suit that gleamed under the stage lights, calm, powerful, untouchable. She didn't even look back at him. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to remind him of every mistake he had ever made. The summit began with presentations, financial reports, growth strategies, market forecasts. Mark barely heard any of it. His eyes stayed locked on Olivia, his chest tightening with rage and envy. Every time she leaned toward Ethan to whisper something, every time an executive turned to her with respect, it felt like another nail in his coffin. Finally, Ethan stepped to the podium. The room hushed. His voice, steady and commanding, filled the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, Cole Enterprises has always been built on 2 pillars, innovation and integrity. Tonight, we take another step forward, one that will define our company for the next decade." He paused, letting the anticipation swell. Mark leaned forward, his heart pounding. This is it. Maybe this is the moment he'll acknowledge me. Maybe I'll finally. But Ethan's next words froze him in place. "I am proud to announce the creation of a new division, Cole Communications, a department dedicated to reshaping how we present ourselves to the world. And leading this division will be someone who embodies the very values we stand for. Someone who knows what it means to overcome, to rebuild, and to inspire." The giant screens flickered, and Olivia's face appeared. The room erupted in applause. Executives stood, cheering. Cameras flashed. Employees clapped until their hands stung. Olivia rose gracefully, walking to the stage with her head high, the image of power and poise. Mark's vision blurred. His ears rang. He gripped his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. No. No, this can't be happening. She can't be above me. Not her. But it was happening. Olivia took her place beside Ethan at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. For years, I thought my worth was defined by someone else's opinion. I believed I wasn't enough. But tonight, I stand here to tell you that no one, not betrayal, not humiliation, not arrogance, can decide your value. Only you can. Thunderous applause filled the hall. People rose to their feet. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Her words weren't just about business. They were about life, resilience, and dignity. She had turned her personal pain into a universal truth, and the entire room felt it. Mark shrank into his chair, wishing the ground would swallow him. He could feel the stares, the pitying glances, the judgment, the whispered reminders of his cruelty. This wasn't just her victory, it was his destruction. And then came the final blow. Ethan's voice cut through the applause. Unfortunately, when building for the future, we must also remove what holds us back. Effective immediately, Cole Enterprises will be restructuring certain positions. Some roles will be eliminated, and after reviewing performance, one such position is Mr. Mark Bennett's. Gasps rippled through the hall. All eyes turned to Mark. His stomach plummeted, his face burning red. What? You can't. Ethan's gaze was cold. You've had chances, Mr. Bennett, but arrogance has no place in this company. Security quietly approached, their presence undeniable. Mark shot to his feet, his voice cracking. This isn't fair. I gave years to this company. You're only doing this because of her. Because of Olivia. All eyes turned to Olivia. She remained calm, her expression unreadable. And then, with the weight of the entire room pressing down, she spoke. No, Mark. This is happening because of you. You chose arrogance. You chose betrayal. You chose to throw away someone who believed in you. And now you're living with the consequences. Her words cut sharper than any blade. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras captured every moment. Mark stood frozen, humiliated, stripped bare in front of the world. The security guards moved closer. Sir, please step out. Mark's chest heaved. His eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to take his side. But no one did. Not one colleague, not one friend. Even Vanessa was gone. For the first time in his life, Mark Bennett was utterly, devastatingly alone. As the guards guided him toward the exit, his eyes met Olivia's one last time. She didn't look away. Her gaze was steady, resolute. This wasn't vengeance for her, it was justice. Mark stumbled out of the hall, his world collapsing behind him. The applause swelled again, this time for Olivia. She stood at the podium, radiant, powerful, unshakable. She had reclaimed her dignity, her strength, her voice, and the whole world had witnessed it. But deep inside, beneath the triumph, Olivia knew something. This wasn't the end. Because Mark Bennett wasn't finished. Humiliation could break a man, or it could drive him to his darkest desperation. And Olivia had no idea how far Mark was willing to fall. The night of the summit would be remembered for years. For Cole Enterprises, it marked the rise of a new era of leadership under Ethan Cole and Olivia Hart. For Mark Bennett, it was the night his arrogance finally consumed him. The story spread quickly. The disgraced employee escorted out in front of the entire company, the ex-wife who rose to power, the poetic justice of it all. In the days that followed, Mark spiraled further. With no job and no reputation left, he found himself wandering aimlessly through the city that once seemed to promise him everything. The expensive suits that once gave him swagger now hung limp and wrinkled. The apartment that once buzzed with Vanessa's laughter now echoed with silence. She had packed her things and left, her parting words cold. You've got nothing left I want. Mark tried to reach out to old contacts, but calls went unanswered. His name had become toxic, a warning whispered in the halls of business. Don't be like him. For a man who once believed he was climbing toward greatness, the fall was absolute. Olivia, meanwhile, flourished. Cole Communications quickly became one of the company's most dynamic divisions. Her leadership wasn't just strategic, it was human. She built a team that felt valued, inspired, and seen. Under her guidance, campaigns captured hearts as much as markets, and the company's reputation soared. But it wasn't the success itself that mattered most to Olivia. It was the peace she finally felt when she looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was no longer weighed down by someone else's cruelty. She was free. She was whole. Ethan remained her steadfast partner, not only in business but in life. He admired her resilience, but more importantly, he respected her independence. He never tried to overshadow her triumphs. He celebrated them. Together, they built something greater than either could have built alone. Not just a business empire, but a partnership rooted in strength and equality. Yet Olivia didn't forget the journey. One afternoon, as she addressed a group of young interns at the company, she shared her story. Not the names, not the scandals, but the truth of her experience. There was a time, she began, when I believed my worth depended on someone else. I thought if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, loved enough, it would make me valuable. But I learned the hard way that love doesn't mean losing yourself. Success doesn't mean crushing others, and strength doesn't mean never falling, it means rising after you do. The interns listened with wide eyes, scribbling notes. Olivia's voice softened. If you take one thing from me, let it be this. Never let anyone tell you that you're not enough. The people who try to break you are often the ones most afraid of your strength. And one day you'll see that strength was in you all along. The room erupted in applause. For Olivia, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about using her journey to light the way for others. As for Mark, his story faded into obscurity. Some said he left the city, chasing a fresh start somewhere no one knew his name. Others claimed they'd seen him wandering downtown, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. But no one envied him anymore. No one wanted to trade places with him. He had become the cautionary tale he never imagined he'd be. Months later, at the next annual gala, Olivia stood once again beneath the crystal chandeliers of Cole Tower. The room buzzed with admiration, reporters eager for her words. She wore a gown of deep emerald, her presence commanding, her smile serene. Ethan stood beside her, proud but content to let her shine. As she addressed the crowd, her voice carried a final message. Tonight, we celebrate not just business, but resilience. We celebrate the truth that no betrayal, no setback, no loss can define us, unless we let it. Each of us has the power to rise, to reclaim, to rebuild. And when we do, we don't just survive, we thrive. The applause thundered, echoing against the glass walls, spilling into the night sky. In that moment, Olivia Hart had everything Mark Bennett once believed he deserved. Respect, admiration, love, and dignity. But she hadn't taken it by tearing anyone down. She had built it by rising, by refusing to stay broken, by turning pain into power. And as the cameras flashed, as her name trended across headlines, Olivia felt a quiet truth settle in her heart. She'd been called ordinary, she had been discarded, she had been humiliated, but now she was living proof that no one, not an arrogant ex-husband, not betrayal, not cruelty, could decide her worth. Only she could. And she had chosen to shine. Because in the end, Olivia Hart wasn't just the woman who survived, she was the woman who triumphed. And the whole world had seen it. So that's how the story closes, my wonderful friends. You're still here with me, aren't you? If you've stayed until this very moment, then I know something in Olivia's journey has touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own scars, or maybe it lit a small flame of courage inside you. And that's the beauty of stories like this. They are not just entertainment, but mirrors that help us see our own strength. Olivia's fall and rise carry a lesson that belongs to all of us. No betrayal, no humiliation, no cruel word can define who we truly are. Only we decide that. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Olivia discovered that truth. She realized her worth wasn't tied to someone else's opinion, but rooted in her own resilience. That's why she could walk into a room filled with people who once pitied her, and shine brighter than ever. And isn't that what life is about? We can't always control what others do to us, but we can choose how we rise after the fall. Seneca reminded us, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. The pain we carry is not a chain, but a forge. It shapes us, hardens us, makes us unshakable if we allow it. Olivia's story is proof of that. So if you're here now, Maybe this story is whispering something to you. Maybe it's saying, don't let anyone write your ending. Stand tall, reclaim yourself, and I want you to hold on to that truth. Because one day, like Olivia, you'll see that your strength was in you all along. If this story spoke to you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe so we can keep walking this path of resilience together. Because no matter how heavy the storm, remember, you are more than enough. Always.